Shin Megami Tensei 3 is just Persona 3, but without the heart, and is bad because there is no social simulator.
Did he say?
I'm just kidding. Now that I got your attention, let me first welcome you to the channel and hope that you're doing well. And second, we all both know Persona and Shin Megami Tensei, they're both very similar. However, they both aim for different objectives in the respective game. In fact, Persona is a Shin Megami Tensei spin-off to begin with, so at no real point will I be comparing this game to any of the Persona games released roughly at this timeline. Now, I'm no stranger to JRPGs. I've been playing them all my life and encountered both the good, the bad, the questionable of either being good or bad, and today we're going to be finally exploring the world of Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne HD Remaster for the PlayStation 4. So as per usual, let's jump into several factors for this remaster, being the story, the visuals, the gameplay, the sound, and anything else I want to mention. Now, considering this is a remaster for the most part, it's just a facelift with very few amount of quality of life changes. I will still keep in mind that this is a PlayStation 2 console game. For those who may not be super familiar, Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne is a Japanese role-playing game published by Atlus, in which you primarily explore a vast world with an often larger-than-life story, along with recruiting and fusing demons in order to progress in the story. As for the story, our unlikely hero Naoki, after hearing about conflicts from two different cults, decides to make a trip to the hospital to check up on his teacher along with his friends.
2 hours later.
And then shortly after that, the world itself folds in and transforms into the apocalyptic world called the Vortex World. You will get to meet a lovely child and his grandmother or something, and he ingests you with a creepy crawly, and thus you become the lovable scamp known as the Demi-Fiend. As you progress, you'll hear about two groups trying to change the world into an image they see fit. One being Haikawa's Assembly of Nihilio, and the other being the Mantra Army. Like, there are more groups, but sadly at this point, consider them getting a participation medal and nothing else. Along the way, you will learn more about the characters and their goals from the viewpoints of Denim Girl, teenager with sweet kicks, totally not a Orochimaru, totally not a Sussy Baka, and your teacher. And if you know anything about Shin Megami Tensei with teachers,
wouldn't it shock you if you saw something like that? What's
they love
your
teachers.
service?
All of these characters come into a more important role later on when you decide which faction you want to support. And so for the sake of spoilers, I'm going to drop that. Also, considering the fact this game has 6 endings, yeah, you play your own way, boo. Now let's just get into the meat and potatoes now that I have layered down the foundation of the story and general information. My experience with Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne was without a doubt one of the most frustrating games I have played this year. However, I enjoyed it a lot as well. The game has a lot of great things going for it. The remaster did a good job cleaning up the presentation. Sure, it's nothing home to write about, but it certainly gets the job done, and personally, for the most part, graphics aren't always a top priority for me. The only thing I will give a heads up warning, even though 90% of the game is scaled up for the more vibrant visuals, the cutscenes in the game aren't within the gameplay itself, look pretty bad in comparison. Which is fair due to the compression and porting process. However, these are far and few from in between, and when you see it, depending on what you're watching, feel free to take a quick laugh. I will also give credit where it's due, considering the fact that the overworld of the game starts in an open void desert. Outside of that into the dungeons, the game's locations are pretty unique when it comes to the variety of the dungeons within the game, which certainly helps you remind you that the glooming desert setting is only a temporary strain for your eyes, because you generally move in and out of the world relatively quickly. Alright, let's get to the main discussion, and for the most part, some of the game's strengths and weaknesses. The gameplay. Nocturne is a JRPG turn-based combat system with some dungeon exploring and fetch quests, along with demon hunting and fusing. the means of progressing these dungeons through the use of recruiting demons and fighting alongside them. The combat for this game, if you're into JRPGs, is very addicting. It has a strength, weakness, null, absorb system, somewhat like the Pokemon games, but a little bit more complex. An example where some demons, including you, depending on the Magatama you ingested, in which if you strike a foe with their weakness, not only does it cause them to be in a staggered-like state and deal more damage, but it also gives you a half icon to have even further moves before it returns back to the enemy's rotation. However, you can't keep spamming the same weakness on the same foe for more turns. This only applies once when they become staggered. So the main idea is to exploit these weaknesses and to get even more turns, and to secure a strong advantage. One thing I do need to mention as well, if you are unlucky and miss your attack, you will lose quite an amount of actions you can perform in this rotation, so beware of that. However, this is very much also applies to your enemies as well. They can and will do this very same idea to you. So when you're constructing your team, you want to make sure you have cover your bases with elemental kinds of all attacks, as well as solid physical attacks and healing. In addition to offense, the game also demands quite the attention to buffs and debuffs. There is actually a very memorable fight in this game called the Matador that acts as like a test to ensure you understand this game. Buffs and debuffs are crucial for your success in this game. Well, franchise to be frank. Because it does so much work. Think of it this way. You can stack up to 3 types of buff. So if you raise your attack 3 stages, you can amount so much more damage to the opposing demons in a short amount of time. And you can even extend this further while lowering their defenses for more damage. Aside from adjusting attack and defense, you can also lower your opponent's accuracy and raise your evasion to avoid their attacks. Why is that important again? Well, if you want to live against the Shin Megami Tensei bullshit, right? But again, the fact that avoiding your opponent's attacks and causing your opponents to miss causes them to have less actions in that rotation, which means you take less damage, which also means you have less to worry about buffs and debuffs on their turn. That's right. Foes can and will use stat buffs and debuffs to their advantage, especially in the later games, so be prepared. One of the things I adored about this game is the fact that the game doesn't really treat your team all that special. Basically, there are a set of rules in place to follow in this game, and for the most part, everyone plays to the status quo. So in defense for when people call these moments Shin Megami Tensei bullshit, I have to say it puts you in the game on a relatively even playing field, as both sides can and will use same dirty tactics. As I mentioned, you will often want to try to recruit demons throughout the dungeon in the game. Be warned, they will have to be at the same or lower level than you. And otherwise, they won't even give you a chance at even joining your cause. To recruit a demon, you have to have yourself or a demon with an appropriate skill to talk to them. And then you'll either have to give the demon what they are asking for in terms of money or items, and or pass a speech check. Now, after 70 hours nearly of total playtime, I could never really figure out a rhyme or reason why sometimes they may join you from the get-go, and sometimes when they may just say F off and take your stuff. The recruiting process is very annoying part of the game due to the lack of consistency. However, thankfully you can make do with the recruits you generally do on your own if you give the old college try. Be sure to try to recruit when you can, but don't get discouraged if you don't tame the demons at a record pace. Be sure to also record your demons in the compendium at the Cathedral of Shadows when you can. This will be very important to summon back those demons to either continue to fight alongside you, or to summon them back to fuse, which means to help avoiding needing to capture the same demons over and over again. Just use money to solve your problems. Again, the compendium is a fantastic way to make the fusing and breeding fusing mechanic much more enjoyable. Fusing is very critical to your success, because some of the most powerful demons in the game can only be attained by fusing, which is as it sounds. You take 2 demons together, you smash them together in a horrific display of lightning, and you get a new one. The remaster did a great job allowing you to choose the skills of the offspring it'll inherit, which is awesome because it saves you on time having to soft restart the fusion for the result for the skills that you want. During the fusion though, you may want to also consider the position of the Kagetsuji, basically the moon in the upper left hand corner. The position is important due to the fact that certain bosses may be easier, or in one case, even possible to win. It also changes possibly demon fusion results and even influences on chest items before you even get to open them. Look, I'm gonna be real honest with you. Shin Megami Tensei 3 doesn't really do anything to hold your hand at all and is pretty unforgiving in its design and difficulty. So for the sake of your mental health, don't be afraid to get some help from a trusty guide or YouTube videos when things get really difficult or not clear. Early on in this game, I mentioned how I felt this was a very frustrating experience. And why is that? Well, let's delve further into that. So this is an early JRPG game for the PlayStation 2, and the remaster kept the spirit for the modern generation console ports, which means, unfortunately, all the vagueness in terms of where to go next is present. If I wasn't streaming this game at twitch.tv/metallicaerox, I could see this game easily taking longer than my actual end runtime for roughly 70 hours for the true demon ending. The first main cause of this is a lack of conveyance this game offers. You don't have any wayfinder or anything to point you in the right direction, so paying close to the dialogue during the stories as well as NPCs in the overworld are going to be your best friend for navigation. This isn't bad design by any means, it just shows how this remaster is still a hard at the product of its time in gaming history. But even then, there were still some moments I would have never known where to go if it wasn't for a guide or anything. There's an optional section for the game called the Kalpas, and during the 4th Kalpa, the only way to progress is actually to backtrack to an earlier one. And the game's NPC doesn't tell you which one to explore nor which demon inside to really talk to when you get there. Taking the time to explore the dungeons, and especially the Kalpas, are not a walk in Yogi Park. Considering the fact that the game's encounter rate is also through the roof, it just gets incredibly frustrating because of the higher encounter rates break up the pace and slows you down. The amount of wild encounters you will face is absurd, far worse than Mount Moon with Zubats. You can check the likelihood of when you get a demon encounter in the lower right hand corner, but there really isn't anything you can do to prevent it. Sure, you can help reduce the amount of encounters through the skill called Istoma, but even then, it's still pretty consistent. So if you do plan on playing this game, be sure to get an Archangel with the Stoma as soon as you can, or talk to the demon seller sold to the shady broker in the 1st Kalpa. But don't worry, you can trust him. Between the high amount of random encounters and the less straightforward approach, it wastes a tremendous amount of time and is constantly breaking up the percents of progression. However, I feel it's important to mention as much of a pain this game can be, usually 100% of the time, it's worth doing the extra efforts. For what I mentioned about the Kalpas, upon completion it, you get a very important skill to make the game relatively easier in the final bosses, especially if you're like me and went with the physical build for the Demi-Thief. But also, you will be awarded a powerful ally in the form of, aside from the main story and of course the Kalpas I mentioned earlier, Nocturne does have quite a bit of content crammed inside the package. The plenty of fetch quests you'll have to do for the access to the possibility of gathering some impressive demons who do look familiar. And of course some special boss to face off against you to search to complete the Magatama collection. This provides you quite a bit if you ever want to take a break from the main story. So go out there and go exploring, and don't be afraid to travel some dungeons you have visited in the past. Or even some location of old bosses, because you'll never know what you'll find there. Just make sure you are prepared in case something nasty does bump into you. Nocturne is also a very interesting game in which the central character's growth doesn't need to be all that important. You see, this game focuses more on just playing the game the way you want to and do the choices you want to and how they ultimately reflect the ending. The ultimate end goal really focuses on more what happens to the fate of the world at the apocalyptic event, not so what happens to Naoki. This was honestly intriguing to me since most of the time, the Silent Mute JRPG characters serve as a link for you to be immersed into the story and go through the story as if it was for you. However, this was different. So if you're down for stories or games which focus on a bigger picture, you'll love this. Its story is very unique and the development of the side characters are also something that will give your attention a very good shaking. The soundtrack for this game, at the heart of it, is fantastic. I would expect nothing less from Atlus themselves. However, the game itself didn't do a great job displaying this. You see, a lot of the in-game music is the original compressed files from the PlayStation 2 release. And because we are using different technology versus what the game expected to run on, the music and sound a little bit off. If you're going to be playing this on Steam, however, I have been made aware that there is a mod to help fix this, and if you're on Switch or PS4, you'll be fine. But you will notice some songs and sounds sound better than others due to the quality of some of the files and what it might be. All in all, Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, if you're a fan of JRPGs and looking for a true classic to play back in the early 2000s, I can't recommend this enough. For all the problems I had with it, the game's combat, story, and visuals and music kept pulling me in because to me, this is like a Souls game. And the fact that where you finally defeat a really hard boss, it's one of the most rewarding feelings, especially after putting together a winning strategy after a loss or two to be able to understand what you're doing wrong the first time and what you can do as a true demi-fiend to progress. And then shortly afterwards, a much more difficult boss comes in and stops your teeth and it takes your lunch money. The circle of life at its finest. As a PlayStation 2 remaster, the game does what it wants to do fairly well. Though, it's still a remaster. I wish there was a few more changes done to it, such as less random encounters, but ultimately it's up to you on how you cope with some of the ideas from the past. Thanks for watching, everyone, and sorry for the delay on the release of the review. Life has been pretty crazy, has it? Plus this game has so much content, I wanted to make sure that I got my thoughts on point as much as I could, and reflect on why I still love this game even though it gave me quite a bit of a headache. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content, and of course I welcome you to join our Twitch community at twitch.tv/metallicaerox to watch my real-time reaction to some of these games. Love to have you there. Alright, I'm out. Bye-bye!